If there is one lesson World War II civilians learned faster than governments expected, it was this. Food systems collapse long before societies do. Across Europe, Britain and parts of North America, ordinary families faced empty shelves, ration cards that barely covered calories and supply lines that could disappear overnight. What kept people alive was not luck or charity. It was a quiet body of knowledge built from necessity, discipline and, well, ruthless efficiency. These people did not talk about preparedness, they practiced it daily. What follows are not theories or romantic stories. These are documented civilian strategies that kept households fed year-round under constant pressure, and honestly, many of them still outperform modern habits today. How civilians learned to treat food like infrastructure rather than consumption. One of the first mental shifts civilians made was abandoning the idea of food as something bought and consumed casually. Food became infrastructure. Families planned calories the way engineers plan bridges. Meals were designed weeks in advance, ingredients were stretched intentionally, and waste was treated as failure. A modern application of this is simple plan meals backward from calories rather than recipes. World War II households often calculated how long staples would last before deciding how to cook them. Today, anyone serious about food security can start by tracking caloric density per ingredient instead of shopping impulsively. Why victory gardens were designed for reliability, not variety. Victory gardens are often remembered as patriotic symbols, but their real purpose was brutal efficiency. Civilians grew crops that produced reliably in poor soil, stored well, and could be harvested in stages. Potatoes, carrots, beets, cabbage, and turnips dominated because they reduced risk. Modern gardeners, they often get it wrong by prioritizing novelty over necessity. You see, the wartime lesson was quite clear. Build a core garden around dependable calories first. Only then, once the survival needs are met, should one add variety. Just one raised bed of potatoes, for instance, can outperform several beds of leafy greens in terms of long-term food value. It's all about getting those dependable calories sorted out first. Now, let's talk about preserving food at home, which during the war replaced those industrial supply chains. Canning, pickling, drying and fermenting, these weren't just hobbies. No, they were survival systems. Civilians would preserve everything that couldn't be eaten immediately, often within mere hours of harvest. They reused jars, sealed them with wax or rubber rings, and stored food in cool, dark spaces designed specifically for longevity. Quite the operation, really. Today, even basic water bath canning or salt fermentation can drastically reduce our reliance on refrigeration and grocery stores. The key, my friends, is consistency. During World War II, families didn't wait for large harvests. They preserved small amounts constantly. It was this steady, ongoing effort that made all the difference. So, why did bread and starch become, the backbone of civilian survival? Flour was stretched relentlessly. Civilians mixed bread dough with things like grated potatoes, oats, or even legumes to extend supplies without really sacrificing calories. This was not just desperation cooking. It was, honestly, calculated nutrition. These days, modern equivalents include adding cooked lentils or mashed beans to doughs and stews, helping to increase protein while also reducing cost. Wartime cooks, they understood that starch kept people working, warm, and, well, mentally stable, even when meat was pretty scarce. Now, ration cards, they actually force smarter nutrition, not starvation. Rationing did not eliminate food, it forced prioritization. Civilians learned to trade fats, sugars and proteins strategically, often saving their ration points for high-impact items like cooking fat. They cooked lean meals most days and used fat sparingly to boost calories when needed. A modern parallel is learning to reserve calorie-dense foods for physically demanding days rather than consuming them casually. Why nothing edible was ever wasted in a wartime kitchen. Peels, bones and scraps were never trash. Vegetable peels became broth bases. Bones were simmered repeatedly. Stale bread was dried and reused. Even wilted greens were salvaged. This practice alone allowed families to extend food supplies by weeks. Today, keeping a dedicated scrap container for broth and compost mirrors this system and builds resilience with almost no cost. Civilians quietly bartered to fill nutritional gaps. Official rations, well, they rarely covered everything. Folks traded skills, surplus produce, preserved foods, and even labour to balance their diets. Eggs for flour, repairs for canned goods. This informal economy, honestly, it kept people alive. In modern terms, this sort of thing translates to building local exchange networks long before any crisis hits. Food security, it improves dramatically when households specialize and trade, instead of, trying to do everything alone. Now, here's why seasonal eating reduced strain on food reserves. Civilians ate what was abundant and saved what was scarce. Fresh foods were consumed immediately during harvest seasons, while preserved foods were saved for winter. Makes sense, doesn't it? This rhythm reduced waste and stabilized supplies. These days, modern households often reverse this, consuming preserved foods first and, wasting fresh produce. Relearning seasonal consumption, really aligns storage with reality. How communal cooking reduced fuel and food waste. In some communities, families cooked together to conserve fuel and share ingredients efficiently. Large pots fed multiple households. Why civilians planned for hunger before it arrived. The most important trick was anticipation. Civilians acted early. They planted before shortages peaked, preserved before winter, and adjusted diets before rations tightened. Modern preparedness often falls short when folks wait around for confirmation. The wartime lesson is clear as day. Act when conditions begin to shift, not when the crisis is, undeniable. It's remarkable how these strategies still outperform, modern convenience. What really kept civilians fed back then wasn't technology. It was discipline, careful planning, and a deep respect for food as a finite resource. Honestly, these principles remain unchanged. Anyone who adopts even just a fraction of these habits today gains, well, some real insulation from price spikes, shortages, and all those supply disruptions we worry about. There's a reason this knowledge deserves preservation, not just nostalgia. These weren't simply quaint traditions. They were, in fact, survival systems, carefully refined under pressure. Ignoring these lessons just because times feel comfortable, well, that's a mistake history has punished over and over again. So, if you value this kind of hard-earned knowledge, do subscribe to the channel, share this video with someone who appreciates real history, and help keep these lessons alive for the next generation.